Here at home, the president's push to prosecute his political rivals is escalating, as the Department of Justice has now indicted another longtime foe of the president. New York Attorney General Letitia James, a Democrat who brought a successful civil fraud case against Mr. Trump before his second term, is facing charges of bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution. She denies all wrongdoing and says this is payback from the president.
These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost. The president's actions are a grave violation of our constitutional order and have drawn sharp criticism from members of both parties.
Democrats echoing James and saying the president is weaponizing the Department of Justice, while Republicans are supportive of the administration's actions. Although retiring North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis was more measured in his reaction.
I just saw the news report. Like I've said before, I hope that people have done their homework to where this is not a prosecution that doesn't, I don't think, set up or rise to the level of taking the court time. They're going to get measured based on an outcome. So I hope they've done their homework and they've got a valid basis for the indictment.
4, 3.
James' indictment comes just 2 days after another Trump opponent, former FBI Director James Comey, pleaded not guilty in a federal courtroom to 2 charges of making false statements in Congress in 2020. And according to the Wall Street Journal, federal prosecutors in Maryland are expected to charge former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton with mishandling classified information in the coming days. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins me now, along with NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. Thanks to both of you for starting us off on another very busy Friday. Monica, let me start with you. At the White House, typically the Justice Department is, of course, viewed as being independent from the White House, from the president. What has the reaction been so far to the indictment of Letitia James?
Well, I think it's interesting, Kristen, because we actually haven't heard from President Trump on this, and he hasn't weighed in specifically since the news of the actual indictment. But of course, it's important to go back to some of his comments overall on the New York Attorney General and some of the other people that he has directed his Attorney General to potentially investigate and bring criminal charges against. It's your own reporting, Kristen, that confirmed that that message that we all saw in the last couple of weeks that started with Pam : was meant to be a private message for his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and not meant to be posted publicly, even though it was posted on his social media platform. And that message included references, of course, to Letitia James and to others. But notably, right now, the White House is in effect saying that we want this process to continue, deferring to the Department of Justice and not weighing in specifically on this, even though the president, when asked more generally about whether others could be facing the same fate, he did say, and specifically after we saw this with former FBI Director James Comey, that there could be others, though he didn't necessarily say there was a list and an order that he was going in, Kristen.
Kelly, let me turn to you, if you would talk about the specific allegations against Letitia James and this piece of the case, which is that according to the government's case, James was saving less than $600 a year, or less than $500, $50 a month, I should say, because of her lower interest rate. Does that in any way undermine the case against her?
Well, what the government is alleging is that in applying for a mortgage for a home she purchased in 2020 in Norfolk, Virginia, that's why it's in the Eastern District of Virginia, while she is the New York State Attorney General, that she filed the paperwork improperly and called this a secondary residence. In fact, she used it as a rental property in rental income, and the indictment reflects that she reported that rental income on her taxes. So a key question is, was this a clerical mistake or done with the intent to defraud the banking system involved here, the mortgage company, the financial institution, by using the wrong terminology to get that better rate, which, as you described, is in the life of a 30-year loan about $18,000, and when it breaks down to about $600 a year. Did she do this with a willful criminal intent to save $600 a year? That will be part of the case. Fraud, of course, is a serious offense. These are 2 felonies. And the argument will be made by James' counsel that they will forcefully go after this and say that this is really the president and retribution, as we've heard him talk about publicly, and that they are using the Department of Justice against a perceived political enemy. So the case is about very specific paperwork related to a home that she bought 5 years ago. The implications are certainly much larger, not only for James, her career, her political future, but also for the president and the relationship between the DOJ, the White House, and potential targets of any investigation.
So, Monica, let me turn back to you. You talked about that post by President Trump. There were 3 names on the post. Of course, James Comey, Letitia James, and Senator Adam, who has not been indicted, but we know he's been under a microscope, and he is one of the president's biggest political rivals. What are you going to be watching for in the coming days and weeks as speculation swirls about him and also John Bolton, as I just mentioned?
Yeah, exactly, Kristen. I think a lot of this is, of course, related to also one of the key people involved in this, and that is Lindsay Halligan, who was brought in to be this top prosecutor in this job to potentially look at some of these different cases, and we know overseeing some of the 2 that you just mentioned. But yes, California Senator Adam Schiff has also been frequently referenced by the president and by top White House officials as being a potential target. It's unclear whether the Department of Justice will go ahead with some kind of action against him. But this does extend to others as well. When we talk about these issues of mortgage fraud, remember, that's what the White House is alleging against Lisa Cook, who is currently sitting on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors, and the Supreme Court has ruled that she can stay in that position at least until January, when they are going to hear oral arguments. And that is in a separate category, but it gives you a sense again of what the Department of Justice and what the White House is using and talking about and looking into in more of a pattern. We've seen evidence of that mortgage fraud specifically being referenced as something certainly that's being looked into, again, when it comes to people that the president himself has talked about very specifically. And it was in that message to the Attorney General that he said, in his words, this was about his credibility being on the line, saying that he was getting killed and they were getting, quote, killed for not going after some of these people and not initiating potential investigations where he wanted to see some action really happen. Kristen.
Kelly, finally, just to you, just going back to the Letitia James case, what are the next steps here? What are you anticipating?
She is due to appear for her arraignment October 24th in Norfolk, Virginia, and a summons was issued, so no arrest is expected. That's the same thing that was done with James Comey, the FBI director. And we would also expect that she and her team will begin to build their defense as the next steps would go forward in her case.
All right. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much. Monica, Alba, please stick around. We have a few more questions for you coming up. But first, we are joined now by Ty Cobb, who served as a White House attorney during the first Trump administration. He's also a former federal prosecutor. Ty, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's always great to see you, Ty. So let's start off by talking about this case against Letitia James. Based on what you just heard, the public information which Kelly just laid out, what do you make of this case against Letitia James? Do you think it'll go to trial?
I don't believe so. Predicate for the few dozen of these types of cases that were brought a year ago is well over $500,000. This much lesser sum, where I guess they're saying that the benefit to her was $50 a month. The amount that they're seeking assumes that it will run the full term of the course is not the right legal standard. The indictment itself is very thin, doesn't really contain sufficient facts to put any defendant on notice as to, what the real alleged crime is. This sort of reflects the amateurishness and lack of experience of the people who prepared it.
Well, and the same people prepared the case against James. That will go to trial. He says, let's have a trial and that he's innocent. What do you make of it?
Well, I think a trial would be a bloodbath for the government. I think Pat Fitzgerald and his esteemed colleague, also a talented trial lawyer, will wipe the floor with the people they had to go 200 miles to find to choke down the humiliation of representing the government in that case. But I don't think it'll get to trial. I think if there is a vindictive prosecution case, that would be it. Letitia James, close second. Likewise, the level of prosecutorial misconduct and the proof problems associated with both these cases is extraordinary. I think both these cases have a good chance of being dismissed in advance of trial. I think if they get to trial, an acquittal is almost assured in both instances. But keep in mind that that's not the point here. The point is terror. And the point is abuse of power. The point is making them feel the pressures that he felt, that he complained about in his order to Pam Bondi to get these indictments through, regardless of the fact that in both instances, seasoned prosecutors had concluded neither of these cases should be indicted. He wants to punish them. He wants to exact financial and personal reputational harm. So that he's achieving that to some degree. But they're both well represented, and I'm confident that ultimately, given the independent arbiters that the judges will be and the talented judges that are available to do this, that justice will be served and these cases will be dismissed or result in an acquittal.
You know, Ty, Democrats say this is lawfare, pure and simple retribution. President Trump going after his rivals, the vice president, the president's allies say it's absolutely not. That the DOJ is looking at the facts before them and making decisions based on those facts. If you are sitting at home and watching the finger pointing, and of course, as you know, the vice president saying the real lawfare occurred during the Biden administration when President Trump was indicted for various reasons. How can people at home make sense of this? What are the differences for you?
Well, I would suggest two things. One, let's take the president at his word. And when he ordered Pam Bondi to indict his enemies in a message that he thought was private but went on Truth Social, which is a 25th Amendment consideration in and of itself. But when he did that, he made the point that, these people tortured me. I was indicted. This is not fair. Kill my enemies. So I think anybody that's looking to say that it's not retribution has to somehow explain that simple message. And with regard to the considerations of the legitimacy of the cases against President Trump, read the indictments. Those indictments aren't 2 or 3 pages. They're detailed, speaking indictments that go through piece of evidence after piece of evidence, quoting existing documents, quoting people, quoting and demonstrating exactly what the crime was, how it was committed, what the evidence is. So compare the indictments against President Trump, which lay out crimes that undoubtedly occurred. Whether he would have been convicted or not, nobody knows, because Eileen Cannon in one instance corruptly prevented a trial, and in the other case, time ran out. But compare those indictments. Those indictments are very, very detailed and factual. In these indictments, even Comey, when he went to his arraignment, his lawyers had to make the point they still don't know who the alleged leaker is. It's not identified in the indictment other than as person 3, and they can't figure it out. If they can't figure it out, how did the grand jury figure it out? I think the grand jury activity in both these cases will become very important in connection with the motions to dismiss, and I think we'll see a lot more misconduct unearthed.
I want to ask you, Ty, because you've obviously been quite outspoken against what we have seen in the second Trump administration. Are you concerned that he might that the Justice Department might come after you?
Oh, I don't worry about me, and I'm sort of irrelevant to this analysis. I'm trying not to be outspoken. I'm trying to just recite facts, like specific indictments that lay out detailed facts versus, bald allegations that seem to not really adequately charge a crime.
Let me ask you, President Trump has been deploying National Guard troops to various U.S. cities. Ty, as you know, it's been tied up in the courts. Do you think it will go to the Supreme Court, and do you have any sense of how the High Court might rule?
So I'm not sure it'll go to the Supreme Court, but it may well. So both statutes involved, the statute that's currently under consideration, Section 12406, which is about the federalizing of the National Guard in these instances, has some language in it that is a little bit more of a bar to what the president is attempting to do than the Insurrection Act. But the Insurrection Act itself gives Trump all the leverage he needs if he really wants to achieve this. And there are very few restrictions in that act. And I think even as to 12406, it's a very, very close call as to whether the president can lawfully do what he did. Now, the only thing that prevented the Oregon judge from allowing the president to do it was not necessarily, the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground colorably satisfied the statute, but the good faith aspect that she inserted in, and inconsistent with the Sterling case in the Ninth Circuit, which required her to do so, she relied heavily on the fact that the president was relying on 5-year-old videotapes when he talked about a war-torn Portland and the hysterical nature of his claims about what was actually going on in Portland. That may not necessarily be as effective in the appellate cases. I think if the Supreme Court carefully considers a very close call under 12406, but it's not much of a close call under the Insurrection Act if the president wants to go that route, because there are very few limitations there, as both parties have recognized for years, but nobody's done anything to tighten up the act.
All right. Ty Cobb, as always, we really appreciate your perspective on these big days. Thank you so much.
Always wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.